Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to the Embrace Mental Health podcast,
where we embrace a not-so-clinical approach
to conversations surrounding all things mental health. Hello and happy Mental Health Monday. Welcome to the Embrace Mental Health podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey, and today I've got my co-host, Autumn, with me. Hello, Autumn.
Hi, everyone.
And we have a good topic. I think this is going to be a topic that a lot of people are going to be interested in, because I've heard from a lot of people that this is something that they wish there was more resources out there for. So today's topic is tips for loved ones, but specifically, I mean, we're going to probably be doing tips for loved ones throughout this whole podcast, like not just this season, but forever, because you never run out of ways to help people become better supports for the people in their life who struggle with mental health. But today's specific look into it is to talk about how to be a safe person and how to not be an unsafe person, essentially. Yeah. But of course, before we dive too deep into it, we have our introductory question. And so I definitely grew up as a big Disney kid. I'm sure I was a 90s kid, so I feel like that was when Disney was like really coming of age and had like, I don't know, some of its golden movies. But I suppose everybody feels that way about their era of Disney. But anyway, one of the classics, although I honestly, so Beauty and the Beast is like one of my favorite Disney movies now, but it scared the crap out of me as a kid. Like I watched it once, and ironically, it wasn't even the Beast screaming and like yelling and being angry all the time so much that freaked me out. It was at the end when he turns from the Beast into the human, and he has like beams of light coming out of his fingers and toes, and I was like, I don't like that. So I didn't watch it very much as a kid because that freaked me out. But then I feel like in my like teens, I started watching. I would watch Disney movies during exam week, and so I would study, and then I would make a smoothie and watch/nap through a Disney movie, and then would like finish my studying. But anyway, so I've always thought it was interesting, you know, like all of a sudden this household just turns in from a bunch of people to like a bunch of inanimate objects. Although I guess they're not inanimate; they're animate objects. But anyway. But I've always wondered, like, okay, so if somebody came into my household and I turned into an object, like what would be the fit for me? Because obviously Lumiere, it was like, just had the candlestick vibes, right? And like they kind of fit their personalities. So the question for today is, in a Beauty and the Beast type of situation, what household item do you think you would be turned into?
Okay, so I have a confession. I've never seen the movie. I was actually a strong Nickelodeon kid. Okay. I loved Nickelodeon growing up, but I like very much so know the premise, and I like seen bits and pieces enough to know exactly what you're referring to. So my answer for this, I just thought of a different one on the spot. Okay, so my answer initially was a record player. I feel like I have kind of my love for music in general, but there's also just kind of like this classic but like edgy vibe. At least the record player that I have, it's like wooden and black, so it looks like really cool but like really classic. And I like to think that I'm edgy, maybe not. Like when you see me walking around like my yellow sundress, you're like, edgy who? But I feel like I would turn into a record player. The answer that I thought of like when I was like talking was a houseplant, because I love houseplants and I have so many of them. But I think record player is a little more accurate. So
I will say, like, I was a Nickelodeon kid growing up too. I watched Nickelodeon Channel more than I watched Disney Channel, but I still watched Disney movies. So I guess I was like an eclectic mix of both there. So we'll have to cross-reference our Nickelodeon days sometime, because that would be fun too, I'm sure. But I have thought about this before, and I wish I could say something cool like a record player, but I honestly think probably what I would turn into is a couch. And I am just like the the loungiest person. Like I have to, just as a confession for people who actually know me and spend time with me in real life, if I am not in the most comfortable place in the room, I am at least a little bit salty. Like and I don't even like sitting. I don't even like sitting in a comfy chair. I have to be reclining. Like I have to be laying on my whole couch. Like so it's probably a good thing at this point that I live alone and I don't have like people competing for spots, because like otherwise we'd have to have like 5 couches in my house, because I'd be like, "No, I need to lay down. I can't just sit on a couch. I need to lay on the couch." But
Dang. Wait, this might make some things clear. So, do you remember at my sleepover, you were sitting on the floor for the
yep,
movie,
yep.
and our friends got these like rubber putty like toy thingies, and Kelsey kept slapping me on the leg, and now I understand why. 'Cause she was bitter and salty about not being on the comfy places because she was on the floor. Wow.
The floor is the only place I could lay down, but it wasn't comfy. So yeah, it was a little, I had to get out my anger I guess.
Yo. That's so funny, actually. All right, thanks for the clarity.
Yep, yep. But I'd like to say something maybe of like, couches is where we can all sit and come together, but it's
Oof.
really just that I'm lazy and want to lounge. So my two, like, I prefer to either be walking, moving, or laying down. I don't like standing, like just standing without any
Mm,
movement. Don't like standing. I really don't like sitting either. Like I need to be
that's so
moving or
interesting.
laying down. Like, yeah. So
Huh. The more you know, you always learn something new about Kelsey.
always learn something new. Yep. All right. So now to get into our topic here. Um, so obviously, Autumn and I have both been open about the fact that a lot of our approach, or, almost entirely our approach to what we share in this podcast is from personal experience. And so while we're going to continue to have other episodes that are on this topic and different approaches to it or different perspectives for it, today is essentially probably entirely going to come from a place of personal experience. Like when we have been in the worst places of our mental health, when our anxiety has just been completely overwhelming, or we've been in those like deep pits of depression, looking at who were the people in those times that were the most helpful, the most supportive, safe. Safe is a word that we've used a lot of, like, okay, if you are going through something and you need somebody as a support, who is a safe person to go to? And so kind of breaking down, looking into, okay, so like what does a safe person look like to somebody who's struggling with mental health? And then also on the flip side of that, what are some of the characteristics of somebody who's just unsafe, or just not a place that you're going to feel comfortable struggling or being honest or being real or vulnerable within the hard parts of mental health.
Yeah, and
So
I just
yeah.
want to preface before we like jump into this, if you're listening to like the things that we're saying in the list and you're finding out like for the characteristics of someone who's safe, you're like, oh, I don't fit this or I don't fit that. And then we're talking about some of the unsafe ones, and you're like, oh, I definitely do that, or I definitely am like that. This is definitely not a list of like how we can shame you into being like a better support person. This is to let you know the people in your life that do struggle with like do have mental health struggles. These are the things that they do and don't need from the people around them. And this is more so of your opportunity to kind of see where you can grow if you want to be that support person. Nobody's perfect. We, even as people who struggle with mental health, we are not perfect in all of these. And
Yeah.
so this is just a reminder, just like let you know this is make this like a base point for you where you can just
Hmm.
like go from here and grow. This is not like the if you're not here, then you suck. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's like a good point of like, there's nobody who's going to always be in this safe list, and nobody who's always probably, hopefully, not always going to be in this unsafe list. Like,
Yeah.
and you might be, patient 90% of the time, and then they have that one time where you just kind of lose your patience. And that's okay. We're all human in this, and like it is a
Yep.
challenge, and it's hard to know how to walk alongside somebody a lot of the time too. And this will be something that I'm sure will keep coming up in this in this topic. But another thing is to make sure that you have your support in this too, and that
Yeah.
you have your boundaries in a healthy place too, so that you're caring for yourself as well as caring for this person that you're walking
Yep.
alongside. So yeah,
Amen.
good preface. Yes, thank you. All right. So originally, this was supposed to be a list of 10, but we got it down to 11. So there's 11 characteristics that we have for each of these, a nice, even, normal number, like 11. Um, but that's how we roll here. So the
Facts.
first one that we have of a characteristic of someone who is safe is somebody who's a good listener. And, this is something that we've talked about in previous episodes, specifically, I think, around therapy and what some of the benefits of therapy is that it's just literally somebody who is trained to be a good listener and to listen well. But this isn't like, it's not like therapists hold the corner market on listening and nobody else has to worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
being a good listener is just part of being a good friend. But, for people who are struggling with mental health, having somebody who is a good listener in your life and who can just listen to you vent or talk or express or worry or, just say the things that you've kind of covered up. Because a lot of times there's so much you're trying to hide when you're in the middle of this. And so somebody who can be a good listener and allow like that to come up a little bit is an important
Yeah,
characteristic.
definitely. And I think like honestly, with you saying that, I'm looking at a lot of the ones that, we're going to talk about. And I feel like a good majority of them are kind of uh examples of what a good listener is. I feel like being a good listener is like honestly the number one thing when it comes to being a support person. And a lot of these are sub bullets of
Yeah.
what it means, what it looks like actually practically to be a good listener. And our next point is non-judgmental, which I think really goes hand in hand with being a good listener. Making sure that you are coming from a place of being as unbiased as possible, but also adding in, maybe not even unbiased, but like leaning more towards empathy
Yeah.
than like being harsh or yeah, just being like hard on someone. Trust me, they're
Hmm.
already being hard on themselves. And so coming from a place of empathy, recognizing that the things that they're saying or the things that they're doing or struggling with in that moment might not be, the best thing for them. But they're not healthy right now. So they aren't capable of doing all the things that would be the best things for them in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's hard enough, we've talked some about how like in a part of mindfulness. So when a person who is in that struggle themselves is already trying to find a way to be non-judgmental towards themselves. And so anytime that somebody else brings their judgment into it, that's like that much more judgment that that person then has to fight against. So the
Yeah.
more that you can just come from a neutral place and just like you said, like we've said, be a good listener, but not have these reactions or feel like you have to,
Yes.
just being allowing the person to be where they are and accepting them where they are, but still coming from a place of believing where they can be too.
Yeah. And like just one really quick practical thing when it comes to being non-judgmental, watch your face expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Like when someone's saying something, I know for me, like I'm very intuitive when it comes to reading people's body language and like micro expressions and things like that. So if you're like
Yeah.
making weird faces when I'm telling you like, what happened when I had a psychotic episode, I'm going to feel your nonverbal judgment. Judgment
Yeah.
is not just with your words, it is with your body
Yeah.
language, it's with your facial expression. So be careful with those kinds of things too.
Yep. Yep. All right. The next characters that we have, so number 3 is just be present. I think a lot of times people are like, oh man, somebody is struggling. I need to come up with the right thing to say. And so a lot of times like people just get distracted and they're listening because they're trying to figure out, okay, what's the perfect thing to say here to make it all better? And reality is like when I was in the midst of my deepest anxiety, the people who were the biggest difference for me was somebody who just sat with me and like watched a funny show with me because that was all I could
Amen.
handle. like just sitting with me and being with me and saying like, yep, you're going through something. This isn't who you normally are, or like, this isn't what I'm used to you being able to be, but I don't care. I just still want to be present with you and let you know that you're not alone in this. Like, just presence alone is so much more important than having the right thing to say, or having to have the answer to all the things, or asking all the perfect questions. Like, because I mean, the reality is that you're not a trained therapist, right? And even if you are, like, you're not really supposed to therapize your people.
Yeah.
And so just being present is such a huge deal.
Yeah. The only thing that I will add to that is, even if you are the type of person where you're really good at asking questions and you have like really good resources or really good answers and really good advice, I would encourage you to maybe lean into the being present a little bit more, because even if you're good at it, sometimes that's not what a person needs. Sometimes I'm just too exhausted to answer your really, really good questions. Sometimes I'm just not in a
Yeah.
place to hear your really, really good advice. Sometimes I
Yeah.
literally just want to watch The Office and laugh and not think about my problems. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
The next one that we're going to talk about is being gentle but persistent. Um, I will put myself out there and say that I am sensitive. I'm not someone who's like easily offended, not sensitive in that way, but sensitive like emotionally. Like when I'm in a vulnerable place, please be gentle with me. Like I will cry. um, but also recognizing that like it's okay for you to, I guess like recognize that there is better for me, recognize that I can become a healthier person and desiring that for me, and very gently like walking on that path with me, not shoving me like along the way, because I promise it's not going to work and I'm still just going to cry. um yeah, I don't know. I think gentleness is honestly just like one of the most beautiful and attractive traits to me in people in general.
Yeah.
And so do that. Practice that if you're not good at it. Some people aren't good at that, and that's totally like that's just how you are. Practice it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think like it's gentleness, like you said, is such a desirable trait, but it's like kind of frowned upon in our society, especially. Like I think like boldness, or like almost even like anger or hot takes or whatever, is like, oh yeah, that's what we kind of like validate or whatever in our society. But
Yeah.
like truly, there's so much beautiful power within gentleness. And like you said, like when you're in that place, I think Autumn already kind of mentioned this, but like we promise you, like when was in like the worst places of anxiety and I'm like, oh my gosh, like nobody else is scared of this thing. Why am I scared of this thing? And I am beating myself up. Like like
Yes.
people who struggle with mental health, they are beating themselves up already. And
Yes.
so you coming in and saying like, well, just buck up, or like just deal with it, or just do it, like kind of trying to take that tough love approach. Like gentleness always worked better for me than somebody just trying to tell me to buck up. And so just that gentleness of, it's still a reminder of like, hey, this isn't the best that you have. Like there's still better for you. I liked how you said that. But to say it with like a gentleness and a kindness, but a persistence, is that, has been a majorly helpful thing. I think that's one of the reasons why my mom is such a safe place for me, is because she is so gentle within
Mm-hmm.
those spaces, and is just good at not beating myself up. I mean, beating me up more than I already am beating myself up. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
All right. Number 5 that we have on this list is somebody who validates your feelings and experiences.
Amen.
I'm going to say it again. Somebody who validates your feelings and experiences.
Mm.
Um, we talked about this in our dealing with feelings episode, but really you need to start by just validating your feelings, because if you just try to invalidate your feelings all the time, you're never going to be able to work through them, because feelings are not right or wrong. They just are. And so if somebody, if you're trying to talk with somebody and you've got these emotions that you're trying to deal with, and somebody's like, well, you really shouldn't be feeling sad, or you don't get to feel that way, or you don't have to, I responded in this way, so because you didn't respond the same way I did, you're wrong, or whatever that invalidation can look like. And like Autumn's already mentioned, like invalidation can be as much as a look on your face,
Yeah.
And so whatever you can do to help people validate their own feelings by also being a validating person is just going to help them get there that much faster.
Yes. And I'm going to say, for anything on this list, but especially I have personal experience with this one, so it's kind of fresh on my mind. The way that we treat people is often like deep down how we treat ourselves. And so if you find yourself like consistently invalidating the feelings and experiences of other people, I'm not trying to be anybody's therapist. I ain't got a degree in that, but like, hear me out when I say there's a really good chance that you are subconsciously, or maybe consciously, but subconsciously invalidating your own feelings and your own experiences. And my encouragement to you is go to therapy. All right, number 6, consistent and reliable. Oh my goodness, the people that you can count on when you're laying in the mud and it's thunderstorming and you're in the valley and the sun hasn't shone in years. Like, oh man, those are the people that are just a breath of fresh air. Being the kind of person that your friends know or your loved ones know that they can count on is worth so much more than being the person who always has the right answer. It's worth so much more than being the person who can always ask the right questions. You're just the friend who I know that they're going to show up. I know that they're going to be there for me. I know that they're going to let me come over and sleep in their home because I don't want to be alone. I just know that they're going to offer what they can. With this one, it can be kind of tricky because we're not saying that you need to be the kind of person who's 100% accessible all the time. I think that's an unhealthy approach to life in general. But just being the kind of person where it's like naturally your character, like people know you as someone who is reliable. Like you will give from a healthy place what you can. You're not overextending or overexerting yourself, but you're saying like, yeah, like when you say I'm here for you, you mean it, and then you show up and you act like it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, would you have somebody who can be that consistent and reliable place and kind of just be that like firm foundation when everything else feels like it's falling apart? That obviously is going to make you feel safe within that
Yeah.
person's presence. And so it's so hard to describe how unsettling being in the middle of that mental illness place can be. Like you
Mm.
just feel like I don't have a safe place to stand. I don't know how to take steps forward because everything feels like it's crumbling. I don't feel like I have the strength to stand up. So
Yeah.
when you know that you have somebody in your life who can just be consistent and reliable, they don't have to be like Autumn said, you don't have to be anything special. You don't have to be giving sage advice, or you don't have to be all these different things. Like just being consistent and knowing that, that you have somebody in your life who is going to be reliable, and that, okay, even when you're like in a mentally healthy place, like right now, I would say I'm like in a better place than I have been in previous years and at different times. But I know like, okay, if something comes up again, or that next, kind of difficult thing comes up out of nowhere, or a sudden loss or that kind of thing, I know who the people are in my life who have been consistent and reliable. And that makes me feel like, okay, when that place comes up again, like I have those people that I know can be that thing for me, can be consistent in the throes of the inconsistencies of life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just like the comfort that is, and the help that is just a major thing. Whereas like you also know, you happen to notice what friends are inconsistent, or kind of sometimes are there for you, but only when it's really convenient, or they're inconsistent in terms of like sometimes they're really loving and sometimes they're really not. And like
Mm.
that can be really
Mm.
difficult too when you're like, well, I know I need a friend, but am I going to get the friend who is gentle, or am I going to get the friend who's going to chew me up? Like, and then the second, not to say if you mess up once, but like, if you're just inconsistent in that way too, like that can be like, well, I don't really know if I can go to this person and talk to them about what I'm going through because I'm not sure which one I'm going to get. And so consistency is just, it's so helpful because it's so counter to what mental illness feels
Yes.
like.
Yes. Very well put.
Yeah. Okay. So for number 7, we have patient and gracious. And listen, like we get it. It's difficult to be close with somebody who's going through mental illness. Like I get it. It's hard. Trust me, I get it because like I have to live with it. So,
Right.
I can understand like it's a lot and it's difficult. And there are times where I can't be all the things that I always have been. Like there's, different parts of me like might disappear for a little bit, or I might react in a different way than what healthy me reacts in.
Yeah.
And so I get it. Like it's difficult to deal with and like to walk alongside. But the more patience and grace that you can offer, it makes such a big difference. Because like part of this too is almost a little bit of a flip side of this list. If you're dealing with mental illness, you can kind of look at this and say, okay, these are all things that I need to give myself as well. but I think that's why like people who um, have these characteristics are so helpful because they look different than what your mental illness looks like.
Hmm.
And so having somebody who can be patient and gracious when you're losing patience and grace with yourself is a helpful, very
Yeah.
helpful.
And I will say, um, I think patience is often tied into understanding or empathy. And so if you're struggling with being patient with someone in the moment and they are struggling with their mental health, struggling with mental illness, whatever's going on, just try and take a step back. Um, and as cheesy as it is, like put yourself in their shoes. Like there's a super decent chance they hate their situation. They may
Mm-hmm.
even hate their lives or hate themselves. And so everything that they are like doing in the ways that are, frustrating you or irking you or annoying you, it is they really wish they weren't doing that too.
Yep. Yes.
And I know for me personally, and I think I can speak for a lot of people, if you find yourself like really struggling with being patient with a particular person or someone in their season, I would much rather help someone take a step back from my life than to continue showing up in a way that's impatient and not gracious in a way that would hurt me. I think that is the most loving thing that you can probably do in that situation. If you cannot practice patience and you cannot practice graciousness, take a step back. Let other people step in and fill that gap. You don't have to. You do not have to. If you can't do this, then don't do it poorly. Like, please just take a step back.
One other thing too, I think, sometimes patience means like a lot of times people think of patience as like, okay, I'm not going to lose my cool. I'm not going to get frustrated. But there's also a piece of patience that is just, it's long suffering, right? Like,
Hmm.
like mental health and going through that is a long journey. It's not really one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, I'll go to therapy for 2 sessions, everything will be fine. My mental illness crisis is over and it's done. Like the reality is that this is a years long, often lifelong struggle, journey,
Yes.
things that you have to. So like patience isn't just not losing your cool. Patience is also understanding that you're in this for the long haul and um, not giving up on somebody just because it's taking a while. Because like this,
Yeah.
it's there's so much complexity to a mental health issue that
Yes.
it's not just there's never easy fixes or just like quick. It's not like getting a cold where it's like, oh, I have to be patient with my husband for a couple of days because he's a little extra whiny when he's got the sniffles, but then in a few days, like there's a reality in which this is a years long journey. And so patience
Yeah.
is still, being there for somebody in the long haul. And yeah, that's it's hard because it's
Yes.
grating on everybody involved. But the more that you can, and I think that speaks to that consistency piece too of, you're not just gracious and understanding the first month, but by month 9, you're like, well, you know what, you should really be better by now. Like, it's like
Right.
patience is also understanding that this is a long haul that we're working through. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the next one is someone who checks in and pays attention. I think this one is really important because, when someone is going through like a really, oh, what would be the word? Like animated mental health crisis, something that's like, very apparent. They're really struggling. It's super obvious. And, maybe they're reaching out for help or people are noticing, people are coming around them. It's when things are not so apparent, maybe things aren't as animated that people can often, that I feel like that's where a lot of times people kind of start to slip into their mental health struggles more and more because things are less apparent, people are just less likely to check in on them. It's like, oh, okay, well, they don't seem to be having a psychotic episode. They haven't reached out or anything, asking for support in any way, so they're probably doing okay. And yay, hooray, if you are one of those people that like, struggles, like if your mental health is more like situational. I mean, not yay for you, that still sucks. But like, there are people like that, and that is a real thing. But for the people that have like mental illness and it's just in their life, it's in their brain chemistry, it's in their DNA, it's just how they are. Um, they need people, and I think this goes with consistency as well. They just need people to keep checking in on them. I can speak from like my own personal experience to be someone who's consistently reaching out. You start to, even if it's a lie, even if the other people in your life don't view you like that, you start to feel like a burden. You don't want to keep reaching out. And so having people that are checking in on you, they're doing the reaching out, it is such a breath of fresh air because A, it takes the pressure off of you, but then B, it shows that these people are like thinking about you, not just because, they see me overtly like struggling right now, but they haven't, I seem to be doing okay externally. They see me, going to work and doing school, but they still are aware that I have these struggles. They're thinking about me. And then they intentionally took time out of their day to like ask me how I'm doing. And I just love that, and the second part of this point is someone who pays attention. I know that like being, intuitive isn't, it's something that people have to practice. Not everyone is born with that. Um, but man, it is the people that I personally like just appreciate so, so much when it comes to my mental health struggles are the people who kind of like pick up on the things that again are the nonverbals. They can kind of read my facial expressions, or they recognize when I haven't, talked to them in a few days. Really simple things. I'm not asking, people aren't asking, we're not asking you to read our minds. Just like if you notice that something is different than how it usually is, I usually talk to Autumn every day and I haven't talked to Autumn in a week. Interesting, just someone who pays attention to those things and then actually acts on it, because you can notice those things and you're like, she's all right, and maybe I am all right. But like if you reach out and I'm doing all right, I'm just going to be the happiest little camper because I'm like, wow, thank you for thinking of me, and if
Right.
I'm not doing okay, I'm going to be a sad, happy camper because I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you for thinking of me because I really needed that.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think too, like even something that I've done previously, like if I know somebody has suffered a loss on a particular day, like I'll write it down in my calendar and then I know like, okay, this person's probably having a tough day this day. And just paying attention to little things like that and then making yourself reminders so that you can check in on those difficult times can be
Yeah.
such a huge thing for people. And I think like some of my best friends who have been the most helpful for me in terms of like they know my triggers as almost as well as I do, right? So like if we're in a
Mm.
restaurant and they're like, oh shoot, this particular environment or this particular thing I know has been a trigger for Kelsey before, like checking in like, hey, are you okay? You doing okay? And if I'm good, then like you said, we're good. But if not, then it's like, okay, like let's reassess and go somewhere else. Or, just those little things that when people where I'm not constantly having to be like, hey, I'm having a panic episode right now. I need to excuse myself, but they can almost
Yes.
like help me get ahead of it too and be like, hey, this might be a problem. Should we maybe change
Yeah.
plans? Oh, like that's such a big deal. Like,
Yes.
because it's so hard to like, it's grating on a person with mental health to always have to be the exception too, to always be like, hey,
Yes.
I know everybody wants
Yes.
to do this thing, but this thing is hard for me. And you don't want to constantly be saying that. So, like, people who can pay attention and kind of check in and see, help you kind of figure out how to navigate those things is such a big deal. Like, it's one of the most helpful things I think I've had from people. So, all right. So, the number 9 point on the characteristics of someone who is safe, somebody who is an encourager and gives reminders of strength. Um, I think, my friend Brittany, who I've talked about on the show before, has been, I think, one of the best at this, where like some of the times where I was just like, man, I am not doing okay. I am never going to be okay again. I am never going to be able to be who I thought I could be someday. And like this mental illness is just going to ruin me. And all the time she would remind me, like, you are so strong and you have, you're so brave. She would just say those kinds of things and was just like an encourager, almost like a cheerleader for me. And how, just reminders that I am strong. Cause like it takes so much strength to fight through a mental health issue or a struggle
Yeah.
or all those things. And so to have somebody who was able to say that to me when I was starting to doubt those things in myself, like being somebody who can be an encourager, even if I know that you're not at your best right now, like reminding me of who I am at my best, but also saying, hey, you've got strength, and that the fact that you are getting up every day and like facing this time after time and whatever, it like shows just how strong you are. Like it's a really powerful thing to be able to say to somebody. And so people who can be places of encouragement when you're not doing your best is just really helpful to kind of give you those reminders of when your mental health is kind of, I don't know, sometimes I feel like it's almost like sucking away from you a little bit. Like it's like a, what's it called? Like an invasive species. I can't think of the actual word, like amoeba or whatever, where it like starts to take over you and like take away from you. And that's what I felt like my mental illness did a lot, is like I was like, if I'm at me, like I'm all these things, but then anxiety takes those things away from me. And that's not really true. It like kind of makes them hard to access for a while. But then somebody saying, no, you're still who you are. You're
Yeah.
struggling with anxiety right now, but you're still who you are, like
Yeah.
is major. So
Big facts. I just want to give a brief shout out to one of my friends, Betsy. She, I feel like she tells me like I am one of the strongest people that she knows at least once a day, which is just like, yo, when you're struggling with mental illness, you feel like a wink link. Like you are
yeah.
just, oh man, you're so hard on yourself. And you're like, why am I like this? And blah, blah, blah. And to have someone like see strength in you,
Hmm.
amen to that.
Yep.
Um, Number 10, coming in towards the bottom of the list, we have someone who comes from a place of hope and positivity. And I think this kind of ties in a little bit with the
Hmm.
one that Kelsey just mentioned about someone who is an encourager or gives encouragement. Um, Recognizing that people who are struggling with their mental health they're just in a dark place, and that looks different for everyone. But having people who are outside of that is so nice. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that if you're struggling with your mental health that you can't, I think people struggling with mental health serve a different and really important role in people's lives who are also struggling with mental health. There's that like kindredness and we understand each other. But people who are able to come from a place of hope and positivity and they're kind of outside of the mental health struggles in the time that you are struggling, it just breathes such a breath of fresh air into a stale, cold place that you're in.
Yeah.
And I want to like add a caveat to this. Comes from a place of hope and positivity. We are not talking about toxic positivity here, people. Kelsey's already mentioned it, the idea of like pick yourself up by the bootstraps, like you can do this. You're okay. You're all these things where it's just like you sound like you're giving off energy of like the Teletubby baby, the sunshine baby from the Teletubbies. And it's like, yo, I could punch you in the face right now because all the stuff that you are saying just feels fake. It
Yeah.
feels so fake. And I feel like a good picture to paint, this might not make any sense, but it makes sense in my brain. I imagine my mental health struggles as like, I am like standing outside on a curb and it's just downpouring. For some reason, I'm in New York in my mind. Do with that what you will. I am in New York on a curb and it is pouring rain. And someone who is like toxic positivity is someone who is trying to like rip you out of the rain and like put you in a building that way you're safe and dry. They're like, patting you down. So they're trying to dry you off. And I think of someone who is like in a healthy way, hopeful and positive is just someone who offers you an umbrella. It's like they are not trying to fix everything for you. They are just trying to meet you where you are at and offer you a little bit of something to keep you going. And so I think it's really important to remember the difference between positivity that's authentic and toxic positivity that just comes from a place of, oh, there's no such thing as bad, good vibes only kind of thing. So
yeah. I know I struggled when I wrote this word down, because positivity can sometimes have this connotation to it where like what we do not want is we don't want a positivity that is a different form of invalidation. Because if you're like,
say that,
like if you're like, man, I'm just really feeling blue, and it's like, don't feel blue, feel happy. Like that's not the kind of positivity we're talking about here. We're positivity of like, like, hey, I know right now you don't feel like you have much to offer this world, but like you do. Or things like a hopeful positivity of like, yep, you're struggling through it right now, but I do believe that you can keep fighting and that you can find something, a better strength for you. Or, those kinds of things that give you hope. Because like that was one of the hardest things for me was like, I was like, man, I felt like I was losing so much of my dreams, like the things that I saw for my life and stuff, because I was like, I'm too anxious to function. And so I'm losing all these things, like all these dreams and these aspirations I had for my life because I'm too sick to get there. And so the people who are there say, no, this is a battle for you, but you can still, we're going to figure this out. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep working towards it. And just that hopefulness is a difference versus, like you said, like that toxic positivity that's actually just kind of invalidating where you are. Like, it's like, it can say, yes, this is hard, but good days are coming too. Some of those, you need somebody who can be hopeful, but like you said, in a genuine way. So.
Yeah. The key phrase, if anyone takes notes while they're listening to their podcast, I don't know, I doubt anybody does, but like take notes right now, take out your phone, get out a pen. Don't take out your phone if you're driving, but like, hear me out. This is the thing that I say to people all the time when they're really going through it. And I think it is, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think it's kind of golden, right? Here goes, everyone. It's okay to not be okay, and one day you will be okay again. It's this idea. Yes, it's this idea of like, where you are right now is where you are, and there is nothing wrong with you. And in the deepest part of my bones, I believe that one day you're going to be okay again. It's a both and.
Yep. Chills, man. Like, yes, that's exactly. Beautiful. Well, we've already got the reel figured out for this week, so that's perfect.
That's so funny.
Oh, man. All right, so our last item on this list of characteristics of someone who is safe is somebody who is willing to give extra support and help. And I'm just going to say this right now, like when you are in that mentally challenging place, it is exhausting. Like it takes every ounce of energy you have just to survive some of those times. And so when you have somebody who's like, yep, my friend is going through it right now, I'm going to come over and just help her with her dishes.
Yep.
Like stuff like that is just monumentally helpful, because like it's so hard when you're in that place, you're exhausted, your housework is piling up, all that kind of stuff, and you're like, well, man, now I'm exhausted and my house is a mess and like all these things. And you're just like, and I'm just so overwhelmed because I don't have the energy to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
And people who are just willing to help with those little things is such a big deal because it gives you like, okay, that's one less thing that I have to feel bad about myself for. One
Yes.
last thing, one less thing that I have to try and store up enough energy to deal with on top of battling my
Yes.
own demons.
Yes.
And so anybody who can just, even like something as simple as bringing you a meal or helping you
Yeah.
tidy up a little bit, or just some of those little things that can be just a little extra support and a little extra help can be such a big deal.
Yeah. I would encourage you, especially if you've like heard some of these other ones and you're just like, maybe you're just one of those people where you don't have a high EQ. That does not make you a bad person. That's just
Yeah.
not how you were wired. That's okay. You're allowed to lean into the more practical ones. And this is one that can just, oh my gosh, it can bless people so much. I know for me, I've had friends come over and just take my dogs out because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I cannot get out of my home to take my dogs. And I know they need to go to the bathroom. And I feel like a bad dog mom, which adds to my shame, which adds to my depression. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. Friends like, yeah, let me come take your dogs out. And then let me come feed your dogs. It's like, I could cry a river right now for you saying that. Doing the super practical things like, for you people that you're just more of a practical person, we need you. Your mentally ill
Yes.
friends, we need you. You do serve a purpose. It is not all like empathetic listening and reflecting back. Like your practicalness can bless us so much. And so don't be afraid to lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point to make for all of this is like, I feel like, as we were describing this, I'm like, man, people are going to leave this episode thinking like, man, I have to be perfect and I just don't have the capacity to be all of these things for people. And it's not like, okay, a good friend has to be all of these things. And then if you mess up on one of these, then you're just going to be toxic and unhelpful and all those things. It's really not like, it's like, yeah, find a few of these things that you're like, hey, I can do that and
Yeah.
do that. And really, it
Yes.
doesn't have to be complicated. Like just sitting and listening and being present is so much. Or like you said, if you're one of those practical people and you can just kind of show up and help with a couple of the logistical type of things, whatever it is that you see on this list that you're like, okay, I'm going to have a little bit harder of a time being patient. Like Autumn said, okay, like take a step back, maybe don't be in that part, but I can go and help somebody with dishes. Find the things in this that you're like, oh, okay, this is something that I can do.
Yeah.
And if it's something you struggle with, just kind of maybe not putting yourself in a position where you're going to be
Yeah.
the other end of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you don't have to be the perfect superhero friend here. Like present and figuring out just a way that you can be supportive is going to be a huge deal.
Definitely. Yeah, and the last thing that I'll say is like I'm a big advocate for like we are not made to do life alone. No one is.
Yeah.
And I think also we are not made to do life with just one other person. I think life is meant to be lived in community.
Yeah.
And I am going to acknowledge right now that I'm coming from a place of privilege because I have the best community in the entire world. I know like especially with like younger generations, it's getting harder and harder for y'all to be able to find and build community. But the reason why I make this point for this episode is because, and this might even be, kind of a little more pointed at people like me who are struggling with their mental health. One person can't be your community. One person cannot be all 11 of these bullets. They're not made to be.
Yep.
And it's not fair to have that expectation for them to be.
Yep.
I think the reason why we are meant to live life in
Nor
community is
honestly,
because
nor
yeah, go for
honestly
it.
are you meant to be that one person for somebody. Like,
Yes,
if you're
exactly.
like, man, I've got this person
Yes.
and I need to be all these things. It's like, no, we're made to be more than just one person to help. Like you said, like you don't have to take this whole burden on yourself either. Like there
Yes.
should be other people involved because nobody's built
Absolutely.
for that. So I'm sorry. I
Yes.
just felt like,
Yes.
but yeah,
No,
finish
you're
your
good.
thought.
Yes. Don't have that expectation of yourself. And for other people who are struggling, don't put that expectation on a person, right? We need a lot of people to fill in the
hmm
gaps because when we are struggling with our mental health, there's a whole lot of gaps. A whole lot of
hmm
gaps. And if you surround yourself with a good amount of people, there's going to be at least one person that fits each of these things, as opposed
hmm
to like one friend trying to do it all or two friends trying to do
Yep.
it all. So keep I know we're talking to like tips for loved ones, but like for my mentally ill folks, my kindred spirits, like keep leaning into community, keep trying. I know it's so hard and it's so easy to get burned, and you get exhausted with it, but like when it works, it's a game changer. Like when you
Yep.
find that community, it changes your life. So that's
Yep.
my Autumn's TED Talk of the episode. I usually have one for every episode. That's that one for this episode.
Well, shoot, now we have two reels. We're gonna have to post two reels this week because that was too good too. All right, so as it turns out, we thought we were going to be covering 22 characteristics today, and we're basically at a one episode's level of length at this point. And we were like, should we keep going and have a really long episode, or should we cut this into two? And we've decided it's going to be better to cut this into two, just to make sure that everybody fully takes in all of it rather than trying to cram in too much from a week. So, yes. But yeah, I'm sure this has infographic written all over it. So we'll try and get this out on
Excited.
an infographic. Yes, yes, our infographic specialist here. So we'll kind of get this list out just to have for people to kind of look through and reference. And yeah. So that brings us to our reflection question. And this is one that I heard actually from my pastor. He tweeted it, and it's one that has just kind of stuck with me ever since he saw it. But I thought it kind of fit in with this because it's a good self-awareness question to ask. And as with any self-awareness question, like you always have to, if you're like, like I don't really need to think about this, you probably do. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna way overthink this, like it doesn't need to be that deep. Like this question needs to be functional for however you need it to be functional, to clarify. But the question is, what is it like on the other side of me? And I just always like, that's something that just like I think about from time to time of like, okay, what is it like on the other side of me? Or I wish people in my life would ask that question of what is it like on the other side of me? But like, you can consider all different kinds of relationships. Like if you're a boss or you're somebody in some sort of position of power, what is it like on the other side of you for somebody who is working for you? If this isn't within a friendship, okay, what is it like on the other side of me? If this is, even just some like a significant other or a difficult, even those strained relationships, like what is it like on the other side of me? So kind of considering different relationships, different circumstances, different interactions that you have with people, just something to think about. And, kind of within the context of this episode, for those of you who have a loved one and you are there and you're trying to help them work through it, what is it like on the other side of you? Just kind of, a little bit of a food for thought of, and, a follow-up question is, what would you like it to be like on the other side of you too? And we're never perfect and we're always growing, but this can be a good thing to help you learn like, oh, okay, I'm indecisive. I would like to work on being more decisive because on the other side of me is I don't know where I want to eat, you know,
Okay, call me
something as
out then.
simple
It's
as that.
fine.
I mean, this is me too, but yeah. So just like something to think about, but yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Remember to give us a follow on social media platforms. You got embrace.mental.health for our Instagram and embrace mental health nsc at gmail.com for our email.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you next week. Bye.
bye.